You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
One of my favorite authors. I'm sure you've read The Tipping Point or David and Goliath or Blink or probably the most famous one, Outliers, right?
Maybe, yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell is here, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
He shares my birthday, September 3rd.
I heard there's all kinds. There was like 5 people out there with September 3rd.
Yeah, me, Wax, Paige.
So when was everybody having sex? In December? Okay. Around Thanksgiving, maybe?
That sounds about right. Napoleon has the birthday of September 3rd.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't have a Napoleon complex, though, do you?
I don't think I do. No, I like to think of myself a little taller than Napoleon.
Got you.
Yeah, so that I escape the Napoleon
Do you
complex.
believe in astrology, that people who have a certain sign or...
Well, I don't, but I'm always weirded out when I meet someone who's really into it. And I say, okay, guess what I am? And they always say, oh, you're a Virgo.
Oh,
So
it's
then
like you
I
read
think-
me that fast.
So I think,
Or they
well,
Googled you.
or they Googled me. Yes, exactly.
Now, I've read your book, The Tipping Point, and it's described as that magic moment when an idea, trend, or social behavior crosses a threshold, tips and spreads like wildfire. I feel like we're in the midst of that right now. I feel like we're in the midst of a tipping point.
No, there's something very crazy going on in this country. I feel like people woke up, right? We had it easy for 8 years, and now we've suddenly had to wake up. And like, it's kind of, I was watching these videos of these town hall meetings, these Republican congressmen go home to their districts, and it's insanity, right? It's like they've never seen this. They're used to 20 people sleepily, asking them questions, and people are just going crazy. It's sort of fantastic.
So you think Donald Trump was the tipping point for the country? The election of Donald Trump, so to speak?
I think something in that, there's something that is hugely significant going on with people are being forced to sort of figure out what they believe in and what they stand for, right? And
Woke a lot of people up.
woke a lot. But I think this has been building for a while. I think, you look at what was going on with Black Lives Matter over the last couple of years. That process of getting woken up predates Donald Trump. I mean, I remember I had this strong feeling when people were really getting outraged about police shootings over the last 2 years. I thought this was one of the best things that had happened in this country in years, because police shootings like that have been going on for generations and nobody said anything. Finally, people were like, wait a minute, this shouldn't happen, right? And so I was so incredibly heartened by that. Finally, we're like saying, this just shouldn't go on, right? We have to, and I feel like that energy has fed into the Donald Trump election and is creating something even more significant.
On the flip side, what do you think the tipping point was for, I guess, those poor and disenfranchised white people who voted for Donald Trump? Like for the Donald Trump supporter, what do you think the tipping point for them was to say, you know what, I would vote for a reality show star to be my commander-in-chief?
I think they just, I don't have a good answer to that, because I don't have a good understanding of why these are people who voted for someone who's going to screw them.
Gotcha.
I mean, so I don't, there's no rational reason. I mean, were they just so angry at, I actually think, and people always dismiss this, I think a lot of people were angry about having a black man as a president for 8 years, and then a woman as the successor. I mean, there's a point at which, sadly, certain Americans demand one of their own after a while.
That's too much of a threat to white male authority.
Yeah.
Right. I want to go back, though. Like, for the young authors out there, people who don't know who you are, how did you get into writing?
Oh, I failed to get into business school. That's the short anser.
So he's like, I got to do something.
Got to do something.
Hell of a backup plan you had, Malcolm.
My mom is a writer, and I always, my mom writes really beautifully, and I would read my mom's writing, and I would think, if I can do something that beautiful, create something that beautiful, that would be an achievement. So when Plan A failed, I was living in Washington, D.C. I was illegal. can say that now.
You were an illegal immigrant?
I was an illegal immigrant to the
man.
United States
Sober.
of America, and I had a roommate who kind of hooked me up with like some magazines to do freelance stuff, and I finally got a work permit, and then I ended up at the Washington Post through the sheerest set of good fortune. I had no experience, never written for a newspaper, and I was like 23, and they somehow convinced themselves that I was a good idea.
Do you think it was destiny?
I think it was something, because I got super lucky. I mean, I could do that. I could run my career 1,000 times, and 999 times I wouldn't be where I am now. That's
Wow.
It's sort of like the Super Bowl. You know, you run you run that game. You run that game 1,000 times. Atlanta's going to win 999 times.
So no experience at all. I'm just going to try.
I'd written freelance magazine articles. I'd never written a newspaper article.
Wow.
Now, this is terrible coming from the guy who wrote in The Outliers the whole 10,000 hour theory. You had no hour.
I didn't say I was any good when I was hired by the
Okay.
Washington Post. I sucked. It took me years. I didn't know what to do. I sat there. I sat there and stared at the computer. I had no idea what to do. It took me many, many years to be any good. And to their credit, they were really patient with me. I was a truly terrible reporter for my first couple of years at the Washington Post. A rarity. I mean, there's very, very few terrible reporters at the Washington Post. I happened to be one of them at the beginning.
Now, so being that you're an immigrant, you're from Canada though, right?
I am many things. I am Jamaican mom, English dad, born in England. We all moved to Canada. Then I came here.
Okay, so now I understand why 15 days ago you tweeted you moved to America 32 years ago, and yesterday was the first day you was ashamed of your country. Because I think that was
Now I got a lot of heat on this. Can I?
Uh-oh.
Yes, the floor is yours.
I want to explain. First of all, and the heat I got was, took you 32 years to get ashamed of this country. I was like, yeah, oh, right, yeah. So I shouldn't have. I was feeling this country routinely does things that ought to make all of us ashamed. I think what I was saying was the one thing I always thought that this country did right, even after we screwed up everything else, the one thing we did right was that we were open to the world.
All inclusive. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the one thing I always clung to as special about this country, I feel like the president tried to take that away. And I cried that morning.
And he almost made it happen.
And he almost made it happen.
And
He
still,
really-
who knows what's going to happen next?
But everyone who attacked me on Twitter for like, that was the first, it was absolutely right. That there's no question. I plead guilty.
just
In
feeling
your
that tweet.
defense, though, you weren't here during slavery or segregation.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
In your defense.
But still, plenty of opportunities for me to be ashamed. I mean, so I take. There are times when you've got to take your shots on Twitter, and I deserved every one I got for that.
Now, let me ask you this. Tom Arnold was recently talking about how Hillary Clinton wanted him to release these audio recordings he had of Donald Trump using the N-word and just being racist and all of that. But he said he didn't do it because he didn't want to hurt people's families, and he also felt like it wouldn't matter. We already heard so many things that Donald Trump said, still elected him as president. Do you think that anything could happen that would matter to change people's minds before that election? Like if those audio tapes would have come out, that it would have changed people's perceptions? Or you think it was just they were going to elect him no matter what had happened in his past, what he did, what he said?
Really interesting question. I mean, the question is how much the amount of stuff that has come out on this guy that is outrageous, that doesn't seem to make a whit of difference. There's a mountain of it, right? So would that additional thing of him using the N-word have pushed him over the top? Maybe in one sense, and that is that I feel like people, after the tape came out with him basically talking about
Grab him by the pussy, man.
grab him by the pussy.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people in the Republican Party were really, particularly evangelical Christians, were really, really close to saying, maybe I have to wash my hands of this guy. Mm-hmm. And maybe they just needed one more little bit of evidence to suggest that this is the way he is, as opposed to just some random comment he happened to have made on TV. So I think that might have, and also it may have made a difference in getting, the real problem on November 4th was a lot of Democrats didn't vote. And that might have made a difference in getting a lot of Democrats to vote, to say this is a heinous individual and we have to exercise our vote on Election Day. So it's impossible to know, but I kind of wish he had he had let that out. If it exists, let's see it.
I still want to hear it now.
So does Donald Trump have a tipping point?
I think, it's funny. Every time I go out I had lunch the other day with some very powerful media figure. Not that powerful, but wasn't like, serious. But some guy who knows what's up.
Yeah.
And he was talking about other tapes out there that would be even more damaging. Now, are these urban legends? Is it real? I don't know. But I sort of feel like there is a point where absolutely, I think people Republicans in Congress are already holding their nose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're going along with him because they think they can get their agenda through him of, lower taxes on rich people and whatever else they want. But there's a point where even they have to say enough's enough.
Now, for someone who hasn't read The Outliers, can you quickly explain the concept of being an outlier?
Yeah, I was just interested. One of the most fascinating things about my job is that I get to meet people who are extraordinary in one way or another. And I've always been fascinated about, well, how are they different from the rest of us? And so that book was an attempt to figure out what are all the factors that go into making somebody extraordinary? How do they get there? And the answer that they have talent is just insufficient. It just doesn't get you. I mean, first of all, lots of people have talent and they don't end up doing something extraordinary. Right. But secondly, talent it's the first thing you need, but it's the first in a long list of things that have to go your way. So I wanted to sort of go down the list. Like, what are the other things that matter? And so that book talks about, things like persistence and luck and how culture shapes you and all the other kind of factors that can turn someone who is relatively ordinary into something that someone extraordinary. And you can write 10 books on that question. But that was my kind of shot at it. It was really fun to do, by the way.
A couple of years ago, there was a huge decline in the amount of people reading books, and now it's starting to go back up. What do you think that's from?
I think it's interesting. I think what's happened is that people have sometimes when you need to kind of leave something for a few years to realize how important it is and how much it means to you. So there's part of that. I think there's a kind of shakeout going on in media that people are experimenting with lots of different kind of media and trying to figure out, well, what's the pattern that suits me best? I'm doing a podcast now and
Revisionist history,
which, by the way, second season, I'm half done. Half of the shows are about race. It's really, really, really interesting. Anyway,
finally,
we can get to that. No. Malcolm Gladwell, the black man, emerges in second season. But I think that there's a kind of a shakeout. People are kind of figuring out, look, I have only so many hours in the day. How am I going to, I can read books, listen to podcasts, watch Netflix, watch live sports, listen to the radio, whatever. I got them. And that, what is the right mix for me? And that process, that shakeout's going to take years. So everything's going to be in play. I sort of think, I think podcasts are going to grow substantially. And a lot of books are going to be reimagined as a kind of audio documentary. Not someone reading the book and not a pure podcast, but just to kind of take the material that you would write in a book and refashion it in a way so that when someone's doing their morning commute, they get this kind of real in-depth experience.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to cater to what's convenient for people.
Yeah.
You know?
And you talk about that a lot too, cater to what people actually like. As I saw that, I think it was a TED Talk that you were doing where you were talking about spaghetti sauce.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. The China. Yeah, that I did that. I didn't really know when I did that. TED wasn't a big deal, and I did it sort of as a lark. I thought everyone talks about such serious topics on TED. I'll just talk about spaghetti sauce. So I do the spaghetti sauce thing, and then of course, it's the thing. More people have watched that TED Talk on spaghetti sauce than anything else I've ever done. So to this day, people think of me as the spaghetti sauce guy. It'll be on my tombstone.
What the hell did you say about spaghetti sauce? I don't remember that.
I was trying to explain why do we have so many different kinds. You go into the grocery store, there's like 20 different kinds of spaghetti sauce.
I like mine spicy, just for the record.
It's like, why is there 20 different kinds? Why isn't there one kind of spaghetti sauce? There was a reason why that happened. And there's a guy named Howard Moskowitz, who I discovered, who was the guy who made it happen. And so it was all about like Howard Moskowitz's ideas about how to make people happy with spaghetti sauce. It was like it's a lark. It's not a serious thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of your books are very interesting, and they cater to what's going on now. Like even in David and Goliath, you talk about challenges and how we think about obstacles and disadvantages, what it means to be discriminated against and suffer from setbacks, disabilities. Do you feel like we have any advantages right now with this current administration? And you see racist plans has come back full force.
We're discovering how to fight. We're discovering, community. We're discovering all kinds of things that, like I said, have been dormant for years. I've said on my second season of Revisionist History, I have 4 episodes about the Civil Rights Movement. And I'm going back to the early days, to the 50s, basically. And what is really interesting to me is, so these are people who are living in the South in a segregated environment. They have no power, 0 power, right? And they're starting from scratch and trying to fashion a new society out of craziness and bigotry. And how do you do that when you have no power? And so one of the shows is about a guy named Donald Hollowell, who was a famous civil rights, everyone's forgotten him now, famous civil rights lawyer in Georgia in the 50s. Do you know, there was like 5 black lawyers in the state of Georgia in the 50s. It's like him and a couple of other guys. And he's this guy who is going into courtrooms where the jury's all white, the judge is white, the prosecutor's white, the audience is all white, the black people are they have to be up in the balcony, that's all the only place they can sit. He's the only black man for miles around who is a lawyer. There's a story of him, he's doing arguments, he's arguing a case, and the judge, when Hollowell gets up to speak, swivels in his chair and turns his back to him because he doesn't want to look at a black lawyer, right? So that's what he's dealing with.
Damn.
And the question is, how does someone like Hollowell conduct himself in that environment? Right? And one answer is he has a sense of, he's playing the long game. He's not even sure change is going to come in his lifetime, and he's fine with that. He's like, I'm laying a foundation, and maybe it's my kids, and maybe it's my grandkids, I'm just getting it rolling. And the second thing he does is he never loses his cool. He never gives the other side the opportunity to look at him and say, you're a fool, or you've lost your head. You
don't go ballistic and go crazy.
He is always the most thoughtful, gracious, smartest man in the room, right? Never lets them see him sweat, ever, right? And looking at that, I was like, wow, right? That is a man who learned a series of lessons about how to get his way, the hard way. And I feel like you forget those lessons when times are easy. And now we're learning again. We're up against a very, very powerful set of, let's face it, enemies. We got to learn some of those. We have to go back and look at the people who started the fight 60, 70 years ago and learn from them.
Right. What's scary is people, this whole discussion of white supremacy, and you see white supremacists in these positions of power. I feel like that also breeds inferiority complexes for everybody else.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think you're talking about our new Attorney General, Mr. Sessions,
Mr.
who, let's face it,
Steve
he's like
Bannon.
These guys they're just flat out racist.
Nancy Pelosi called Steve Bannon a white supremacist.
I think that's exactly what he is deep down. Does it breed inferiority, or I think it reminds us the battle's not over, which is, the thing about, I had this, when I was doing another one of these shows, I was talking to these historians, civil rights historians, and they're talking, one of them, this guy, really, really brilliant guy named Charles Payne, is at University of Chicago, was talking about how what even well-meaning white people in this country want to do is they always want to say the battle for civil rights is over. They always want to talk about it like it's in the past. So what they want is some sense of, so they'll hold up famous events in American history, the Brown decision in 1954, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and they'll glamorize those events, and they'll say, that's when we solved the problem.
Right.
And his whole point was, that's a complete misreading of history. Those aren't the solution. They're the beginning. They lay the groundwork for all kinds of necessary work. The battle's not over. And what the most important thing we have to do is to remind well-meaning Americans that, look, it's not, you can't solve these problems in a generation.
Right.
And you can't talk about them in the past tense. And that's what, to me, people like Sessions, when our attorney general is essentially an old school white Southern segregationist, right? When that is just a reminder, look, the battles that were taking place in the 50s are going to have to take place again in 2017 and 2018. Right. You can't push this stuff into the past.
Do you feel like it can be a little different, though? Because I feel like the overall population of people has changed a little bit. Like, I think the mindset of people is a little bit different than it was in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it makes it a little bit hard just to push that old school white racist, white supremacist blueprint on people.
Yeah, we're in a way better situation now than Donald Hollowell was in 1954 in the state of Georgia. But the undercurrent that is fueling people like Sessions and Bannon is the same current that was fueling people back in the 50s. It exists in a smaller pool of people. It's not entrenched in institutions the way it was before, but it's still out there. That's all I'm saying. But I think you're right. It's a different, the landscape is different.
Yeah, people won't allow that. Like, that's an old blueprint. Like, white male authority.
People don't allow it. The man just
This is
got
the Attorney General.
nominated. He just
He's
got
Attorney General.
confirmed
Yeah,
as Attorney
but
General.
that's the white man's Hail Mary pass. Donald Trump was the white man's Hail Mary pass. Donald Trump got in, so now he's bringing his boys. But I just don't think that blueprint is going to work on this country.
Yeah.
They're doing it now.
All right, now what do you think about Chicago? Because that's been a really big issue during this election and after, and even before that, and all the violence in Chicago and what needs to be done there, and then Donald Trump saying that he wants to send in some federal help to go into Chicago. What do you think needs to be done in a city like Chicago to help out the kids, to make sure that the violence goes down and things like that?
Yeah. The one thing I always think, the one important thing to remember about these kinds of urban crises is what I want to hear is someone give me a 10 or a 15-year plan, not a 6-month plan. So when you send in the troops, you're treating it like it's like there's a battle going on, and you send in the troops and you win the battle and then you go home.
Right.
What's going on in Chicago is not a battle. What's going on in Chicago is a city that has a series of serious problems that it needs to do a better job of getting its hands around. That you can't do that in 2 months, right? And we have to stop pretending that these are fires that you just have to douse with a hose and you can go home again. Sending in the troops doesn't solve any of the significant problems that Chicago has. I had a conversation recently with someone who was talking about what's going on in education in Chicago. And the truth is, once you get below the surface, there's a lot of very promising things happening in education reform in Chicago. We don't hear about them. They haven't bubbled to the surface yet, but they're there. And what we really should be doing is trying to encourage that and trying to replicate that and build that out. But that's going to take, if you're trying to fix a culture or city, community, using the schools, which is one very important way, that's a 10-year process.
Right, you have to start with the kids. They have to get older,
Exactly.
pass that down. Because I do feel like it would be terrible for the mentality of the people that live there to have troops come in and make them feel like they're not citizens of the United States, like they're an enemy.
Yeah. It's crazy. Sending in troops, it's just about the worst possible solution, right? Mm-hmm. You really want to send in an army to one of your own cities, and that's going to be, you think that's going to somehow cheer up the people of Chicago to
Make
see?
it worse. I feel like.
Oh yeah, those guys will shoot back. Yeah, they'll absolutely shoot back.
I think they asked you if you could ask God one question, what would the question be?
Who asked him that?
I seen it in a publication online.
Oh, really?
Okay. All right.
What answer did I get?
I think it was something like if he had any regrets.
Oh, I see. Is that what I said? Mm-hmm. That's a good answer. Yes, I'd
God
like to.
regrets making
I'd like to know.
No, the reason I asked is because you look at God and you say He does everything for a reason. He everything that was built on earth. So to ask, did He have any regrets? I just wanted to know that answer. Just
Satan got a kingdom too, though. People forget that.
Yeah. What would I ask God now?
Are you a praying man?
I'm a religious man, yeah.
Okay.
I come from a very religious family. I come from very religious part of Canada. There's a Mennonite country in southwestern Ontario.
So what would you ask God?
What would I ask God? I guess I would ask God whether he's running out of patience with us. Because I guess that's what I'd ask him. You know?
People keep telling me the world's about to end soon. I'm tired of hearing that. But I promise you, like, so many people keep telling me that. And they're like, there's all these signs that the world is coming to an end. And
I've been saying that for years, especially if you follow the Bible.
Yeah. I am at root, and I'm always at root been an optimist. So I'm going to say that I don't think things are coming to an end any soon.
Whew.
So that's...
Do you think Donald Trump is an outlier or just a liar?
Or just out?
You know, when I was on show before, we talked a little bit about he's a very unusual character. He's clearly good. I've been a long time like, what is this man good at? Is he a good businessman? Actually, no. He inherited a lot of money, lost most of it. Is he a good self-promoter? Yes. He's clearly really, really good at understanding how to use the media to his own advantage. And he has a kind of intuition about people that is really extraordinary.
Like a certain demographic of people, though.
Certain demographic of people. He knows how to his ability to kind of speak to people who he has nothing in common with, and who, we said earlier, who he's going to screw over the minute he wins. It's kind of amazing. Like, as a con man, I mean, if you think about a con man, a good con man is always someone who is extraordinarily insightful into others. Otherwise you can't do the con. And we're talking about a kind of a superstar level con man here.
Because I feel like if you're intelligent and you listen to him not answer questions by attempting to answer a question but not really saying anything, then you're like, okay, he's full of shit.
Yeah.
But if you're not that smart, you're like, yes, yes, yes. That's what I feel like. Because when I watch his interviews, I'm like, okay, he didn't even answer the question. He lies about a lot of different things. He makes up facts, and he gets mad at the media when it doesn't go his way. If you don't agree with him, you're his enemy. So I kind of feel like, who are these people that are believing and listening to him?
Yeah. Well, they don't feel like anyone ever paid. I think they're people who feel like the world hasn't been paying them any attention. I think that's the idea that he would go. He spent a lot of the campaign going and doing these kind of events and speaking to people who feel like the political world has ignored them for a generation. So I mean, give him credit at least for understanding that was the way he could win the election, right? Now, like I said,
it was like a challenge on Celebrity Apprentice.
Exactly. But the minute he wins, he turns around and, I don't know how anything he's done in his first month in office helps the people who elected him, except for the rich people who will get a nice tax break.
And you also tweeted, Ivy League students are on the government free lunch program. Only the lunch is at Nobu. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is one of my long-running obsessions, which is people don't understand the extent to which students who attend so-called elite colleges get a massive subsidy from the government. There is the extent to which, so let me tell you, I'm going to answer this question the long way. One of the shows in my podcast coming up is all about golf, and how people don't understand that golf is a sport largely played by very wealthy white men. And people don't understand about golf that golf only exists because of handouts from the government. Golf courses exist because they get special tax treatment, right? So I just throw that as an example. When you go down the list of things that wealthy people of privilege in this country do, what you discover is that time and time again, they have arranged for some kind of special sweetheart deal from the government. That's what they do. Now, this should not come as a surprise to anyone, but there's a myth out there in this country that rich people are kind of self-reliant and do it all themselves, and poor people are on the dole. This is nonsense. The opposite is true.
They get the most breaks.
Right? So if you look at the average student, that tweet was all about the fact that a school like, say, Harvard University has a endowment of, let's say, $40 billion. They don't pay any tax on the earnings from that endowment. Why? Because they're a quote-unquote nonprofit. Now, how an institution that has $40 billion in the bank can be a nonprofit is another whole nother bizarre question I have an answer to. But they're basically free riding on the taxpayer, right? So when you go to Harvard and you see the tulips in the flower bed and you see the brand new gorgeous athletic center and you're paying for it, right? That's so and how is it possible that we are, as taxpayers, supporting an institution that is as wealthy an educational institution as has ever existed in the history of mankind, right? And that it essentially is a school that caters to people of privilege. I don't get it. I don't understand why people aren't upset about this. Like why Harvard could easily pay taxes on its endowment and it wouldn't make a whit of difference in how they do business. Right.
Now, one thing I want to ask too, Gucci Mane said he reads your books when he was in jail.
He said you're his favorite author.
That was like the greatest moment of my life.
Did you know
Suddenly
who Gucci
I was cool.
Did you know who Gucci was?
I knew he was, but I didn't know he was a fan of mine.
Right.
And I was like, there's like one day a year when I get to pretend that I'm cool. That was the day. I tweeted it out, and like picture of Gucci Mane holding up like David and Goliath or something. I was like, oh my God, this is like fantastic.
Have you spoke to him yet?
I haven't spoken to him. But I'm like thrilled to bits, and we had a little love on Twitter.
Now you keep mentioning people of privilege.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the whole concept of white privilege. Do you feel like privilege is just something that's exclusive to white people?
No, but I do feel that the thing about privilege, particularly in this country, is that it's incredibly persistent. So that when people have when people acquire privilege, it's really, really hard or difficult, or they're really, really good at holding on to it, right? And they structure institutions and laws and systems so that they don't have to surrender that privilege. And so once you understand how durable principle is, you realize that there are real historical patterns. So because white people were originally in this country, the people who held almost all privilege, they still hold on to a lot of it. Now, not exclusively. No, it's different than it was 50 years ago. But there is still an entrenched body of privilege in this country, which is the same way, which has existed for generations. And every time there is any kind of activity in Congress about making new laws about taxes or something, you look below the surface, you will see that people who have privilege are finding ways to extend their privilege one more generation.
But how do we get into those conversations? You mentioned golf earlier, and the reason I say that is a lot of times I feel like we're not privy to a lot of those conversations. And I think a lot of times that privilege is taught from generations to generations to generations. And I always say in our community, that's one thing that we don't do. We don't teach. We tell each other we should work for 30 years of our life and then retire and then live off retirement, and we're not leaving anything for our kids. We're not teaching our kids how to invest. We even talk about the bank, and I was talking earlier about, most people who have their money in the bank, only thing that they're getting from the bank is 0.0005% on interest rates, where those privileged people we're talking about know how to put money in stocks and bonds, knows how to buy precious metals. And, we're fighting for 0.005%, but there's nobody teaching us anything of how to be privileged or longevity of holding our own.
Yeah.
But do you feel like that information is easily accessible for anybody that wants to learn?
Well, remember, these are habits. A lot of what we're talking about are habits passed down from generation to generation. You learn when you're somebody who grows up in a home that has resources, with parents who are familiar with the financial system or the school system. You learn how to navigate those worlds, and it's not easy to navigate those worlds. So there's a kind of built-in advantage that coming from a privileged class. I in another moment in my podcast, I'm talking about what it means to have a teacher who is the same color as you. And it's a really fascinating and important point. There's a paper done by a researcher, and he was interested in what determines whether a kid gets into a gifted and talented program. And if you look at gifted and talented programs in this country, they are overwhelmingly white and Asian, and there are very few African-American kids in them. And so he said, why is that? So one answer would be, well, maybe African-American kids don't do as well in school. So he said, I'm going to equalize for that. I'm going to compare really smart black kids and really smart white kids and figure out, do they both get into the gifted and talented programs? The answer is they don't. White kids still get into them, more of them, except if a black kid has a black teacher. And if they have a black teacher, they're just as likely or almost as likely to get into a gifted and talented program as a white kid. In other words, your teacher, who your teacher is, matters. Teachers are the gatekeepers. And if their teacher belongs to your community, they're going to treat you differently than if they don't belong to your community.
They're going to push you more, tell you that you can do it.
Tell you to do it, be more. It's not about necessarily about racism. It's just about the fact that that's the way the world works, right? Now, that is a form of privilege. Getting access into gifted and talented programs is a big deal, right? That's one way that people get into the upper middle class in this country. And black kids are being prevented from getting access to that because there aren't enough black teachers, right? That's a structural thing that determines privilege in this country. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's the rule. We like to believe sometimes that the playing field is level. It's not. In really subtle ways, it's still skewed. And you've got to solve those structural inequities if you're going to create opportunities.
How do you acquire privilege, so to speak, then? Because I don't feel like just because you're born white, that's an easy path to success.
No, it's not. I mean, many ways. I mean, I think...
And this goes apply for everybody, black, women, gays. How do you acquire privilege?
Yeah. Well, these kind of, we were talking earlier about knowing how to navigate institutions is a huge, huge deal. And that kind of knowledge can come from your parents, or it can come from your community. If you have access to that kind of social capital, right, that kind of know-how can make a big difference. I was reading online about this woman who's now she's from Trinidad. She's now a senior executive at Facebook. She was talking about how she comes to America from Trinidad at 16, and she applies. She wants to go to a fancy school, so she applies to Yale. And no member of her family had ever gone to a fancy college before, and she didn't know how to do it. So she shows up she gets an interview. She shows up to the interview, and she's dressed totally inappropriately in like an orange, she's 16. She didn't know. No one said to her, you don't go to your Yale interview dressed in a party dress, right? And so she has this interview, and it goes terribly because she doesn't have that. And she talks about how she finally kind of rescues it. But that's a little bit of very kind of simple know-how. It's not in a book.
She doesn't have the structure right.
Yeah, you can't look it up online. You have to have someone who says, "Oh,
hey, what are you wearing?"
Yeah, what are you wearing? I know about how that world works. You don't dress like that, right? And then so it's like we don't talk enough about that kind of that sort of soft knowledge is really necessary to navigate.
You know what? But I went to Hampton University at HBCUs. They do that.
Yeah, they do.
Right? I think they do it too late. It's a little late in life. In college, they should do it. We should find schools and have programs that do it before. But you take an etiquette class, and you have to take an etiquette class to graduate, where they teach you what fork you use, what you should wear in what business attire is, what is this, what is that, and that helped me more in life than a lot of the other classes I actually took at Hampton University, because it makes you comfortable when you're eating with somebody. You feel comfortable. You know what to say. You know where to put your napkin. You know what fork to use. You know what knife to use. Those are the main things. But we need those programs earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you guys are right.
Do you believe that some privilege is systemic and some is spiritual?
Yeah, I think. I mean, if we wanted to kind of, there's many different. I mean, when you use that word privilege, when I was using it, I was using it. I was talking about inherited privilege, which is only one small kind of privilege. I mean, there are many different ways in which people achieve kind of special status. And hopefully we're in a world where inherited privilege will slowly over time shrink, and other kinds will get a chance to flourish. I think we're in that world. But yeah, I think absolutely there are things like spiritual privilege or you kind of, it when you see it, right? When people have a kind of spark that gives them special access to the world.
Well, as a black man, because you are a black man, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. Because I'm half, I always have to, it's always up in the air. And
what would you consider black privilege?
What is black privilege? It's That's a really interesting question. Well, I talk about black privilege the same way I would talk about any kind of cultural privilege. If you belong to a community that that's real, that creates things, that is full of joy, that has a heritage and a tradition, then you've got a form of, and you can access that world, and you're not afraid of it or scared of it or ashamed of it. You have privilege, right? I mean, I doing these shows on civil rights movement in the 60s, that has brought me joy. You know, it's just like this guy, Donald Hollowell. I mean, what is my connection to him? I don't know. You know, we go back 7 generations. Maybe there's some guy in Africa and we're related. I don't know. But so I have a tenuous connection to him, but I feel a bond with him. And when I learn about what an extraordinary person he was, it makes me feel proud, right? You know, I'm going to boast for a moment. Colin Powell is a cousin of mine.
Okay.
Now, if Colin Powell is your cousin, right? You get that's something, right? I have a connection to something fantastic, something that makes me feel proud of where I come from. That's cultural privilege, right?
Oprah is Charlamagne's mom.
In my mind. It's something to that, though. Because growing up, you know, they would always tell us Black Power and Black Pride, and, you know, we know about the Malcolm X's and then Mark Vesey's and Martin Luther King Jr.'s. So it made you feel regal. Like, they would tell you the black man is God, black man is king. Like, it would give you a sense of pride and, I guess, privilege to be black, so to speak.
Yeah. No, you have to have a model for, you know, you see a version of this in sports. Since we're talking about my heritage moment, talk about West Indian sprinting. Why are so many Jamaicans?
I knew he was gonna get this sprinting.
It always comes to this. Listen, I can't pass up an opportunity to talk about Jamaica and Usain Bolt.
Yes.
So so there's many different explanations for why Jamaicans completely dominate the world of sprinting. One explanation, though, is simply that if you look at the history of Jamaican athletics, they had a series of transcendent runners in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. When you have that kind of tradition, what that means is if you are a 7-year-old and you're athletically minded and you're growing up in Kingston, you have a model for how it works.
Look at, right?
It's more than an inspiration. It's like, you know that someone who grew up down the street from you was capable of running 9.62 in the 100 meters. You know it's not just a abstract possibility. It's a real thing. You've watched this guy on the track, right? Same thing with, you know, Steph starts launching threes and suddenly you watch college basketball now, they are launching threes from so far downtown.
It messed up kids' basketball. That's what they want to do. They want to shoot threes, right?
But it's like everyone's all of a sudden it's like, whoa, it is possible to routinely make 40-footers.
Yeah, at least they're taking the shot. You know what I'm saying? I'm happy that you're at least taking the shot.
Yeah.
Somebody has to inspire you to take the shot.
Someone has to make it concrete, right? It's concrete when you see somebody down the street doing it.
Absolutely.
I am addicted to these online videos of like 7-year-olds draining threes. I find this hilarious.
If you ever go to an AAU game, like that's all they do now. They are chucking threes like they are Steph Curry, and some of them are making them. And that's what they do. You know, when Jordan came out, everybody wanted to dunk. Everybody wanted to do the move. Now, 3-point.
They're
going to have to. The game. We're 5 years away from all threes and layups. We're almost there with Houston in the NBA. And at that point, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to change the rules? Because
that's WNBA.
It's like
it's all threes and layups.
It's all threes and layups.
Make the 3-point a little further back.
I don't know.
The rim. They've been talking about raising the rim for years now.
But I mean, are you happy? Here's my question. Are we happy with basketball played entirely beyond the 3-point line and around the rim? If we are, fine. But it is a different game than we've been playing for 75 years, right?
I mean, it's soft. It's soft now. You can't foul anybody too hard. If you foul somebody too hard, you get kicked out the game. And I was, when Charles Oakley did the thing at the Garden the other night, it made me remember when they played and how rough and rugged it was, and how Jordan had to lift weights a season to get stronger. Now it's so soft. It's the NBA is sweetening up the league, so players can just shoot threes, and it's okay because if you touch them, if you brush against them, foul, technical foul. It's the NBA is getting soft.
Wait, can I make one comment about Oakley? This drives me crazy. And it also drives me crazy that this did not come up. Okay, so you watch the video.
Right.
There's Oak. He gets into it with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
He pushes somebody, right? And then the security guard comes. He pushes the security guard, and then they haul him out.
Right.
All right. And then what happens? They file charges against him. Are we seriously at a point in this country where one guy shoves someone else, and the next thing the police do is file charges? Whatever happened just saying, "Oh, go home."
Go home. Yeah.
This is not working here for you today.
It's not working for you today.
On what basis do you file charges after a shove?
Well, they were clearly out to get him.
Yeah, why approach him with 7 people to begin with? One person walk over, "Hey, Charles, can I talk to you in the back?"
Yeah,
They clearly don't want him there, and they clearly wanted to embarrass him.
Right.
And then release a statement on Twitter about it. And
10
for
minutes
them,
later,
probably
right.
filing those charges are a way to make sure, because they've banned him now
They banned him.
from the garden.
And then insinuate that he has a drinking problem with
Right.
no evidence whatsoever. The whole thing, but why didn't the police laugh in their face? You're going to want me to file charges against a guy who shoved someone else at a basketball game? Are you kidding me?
Right.
I mean, it's just it's absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my final question: is there anything in your books you don't believe anymore? 'Cause last time I talked to you, you told me that some things you don't believe, and that's bothered me ever since.
Well, here's the question. Here's the thing. There has to be, because you have to keep changing your mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I said last time, and I believe this even more strongly now. I mean, we could sit down with the books and go through, and I could say, here's how my thinking has changed. But if you can't do that about something that you wrote 10 or 15 years ago, you're not alive,
Gotcha.
right? You have to. So absolutely, there
we
are
all
things.
change
that
our
we-
minds about things from
Got to
10 or
change our
15 years ago.
What are you working on now? Is it just a podcast, or you got another book?
I got
coming?
another book, sort of, which I'm going to start after I've done this second season of my podcast.
What's the concept?
Well, it's the same concept. First season it's just 10 random.
No, not
shows.
the podcast. The book.
Oh, the book.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm allowed to say.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a mystery. I think it's a mystery.
Well, follow Malcolm Gladwell on social media. He's at Gladwell on Twitter. Y'all don't think you have an Instagram, do you?
No, I'm too old.
It's sad.
So,
There you
at
have it.
Gladwell, Malcolm Gladwell, go pick up all his works, man. The Tipping Point, Blank, Outliers, David and Goliath, What the Dog Saw. I think a lot of things that he's written about really are a testament to the time we're in right now.
There you have it. Well, we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks.
It's
This
the
is really fun.
Don't make it your last time, Malcolm. I'm trying to get Malcolm up here forever.
It's
Be
the
back.
Breakfast Club. Good morning.
The Breakfast Club. Every weekday morning. Tune in